We do, regarding employee, right? Yeah.
Do you have bylaws?
Yeah, somewhere.
The bylaws should be.
I know, I've been asking for, we're trying to complete this whole.
1 minute.
Okay. Well, we need to know.
Take on
Get it done before.
This meeting of the Livingston City Commission is called to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Copeland,
Yes.
Commissioner Short,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Navy,
here.
Sarah.
And you say Sarah in order, so you'll say Sarah and she doesn't say anything.
We don't have her on.
No, Sarah will not be in tonight.
Okay.
All right, sorry. We'll now have a moment of silence. Thank you. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is public comment. Please be reminded to keep your comments to issues that we are not covering in the agenda, other parts of the agenda. Please come up.
Jay Keeper, 325 South Main. At the last city commission meeting, we got, you received some legal advice from the city attorney. And Commissioner Sandberg received conflicting advice. How much money does the city have for outside legal advice? Do they have a budget?
Cover that, sir?
It depends on the issue. We do have a budget for outside legal advice for certain things like lawsuits, grievances, arbitration. In this case, I don't think any money was spent outside of this, no city money was spent outside of the city in this issue.
Well, speaking of spending money, how much money was spent on your YouTube video to support this mill levy?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but that was in the disclosure on it.
Okay. At the last city meeting on there, I wish the same crowd would be here in attendance tonight. So many people were disheartened by the city attorney's ruling. They basically silenced Sarah Sandberg from voting. And I was wondering, has the city manager thought of writing to the attorney general for an opinion?
So the city attorney didn't make a ruling because we don't make rulings. We are only advisory. So there was no rulings made. We made a recommendation to the commission. The commission as a body, according to Montana State Code, gets to set their own rules and regulations. They decided as a committee that they wouldn't allow that last time. That's on the agenda for later tonight, so you can look at some of the information that's there, and I think it'll probably answer a lot of your questions.
Okay. Regarding last year, Mr. Carlos, the governor of this state required all state agencies to make a reduction in their overall expenditures in their departments. What reductions have you asked your agencies to make within the city? Have you even taken that step?
We have taken that step.
And what results have you garnered?
We've increased our reserve by about 3% this year, which brings it up close to what our goal is, 16.67% operating expenses.
I'm not asking about bringing up the reserves. I'm asking what cuts have you made in what departments?
We made a cut in, let's see, last year we made a cut in Public Works. We also made a cut in Finance.
And those were just personnel, or was it people leaving the position or retiring, or can you explain the cost savings in those departments?
Sure, we actually cut 1.5 FTE, so full-time equivalents. So we saved about those positions.
I hate to go over basically the previous city manager, who I will not mention, when he said, "Oh, the underpass is going to be the best way to go on there," and I advised him that basically he's dealing with swampland. And he said, "Oh, well, the engineering isn't improved." And I said, "Well, how are you going to basically violate the laws of physics?" I'd like to know how your answer on that. Thank you.
We don't plan to violate any laws of physics.
Well, it seems like you're going to try to. No, yeah,
Thank you, Jay.
thank you.
Any other public comment? Please state your name and address. So we will move on to our consent items. Do I have a motion by the commission on consent items 8 and B? Or does anyone need to pull a consent item for discussion?
The minutes from the last meeting, if I read them correctly, does not include anything regarding the discussion about the teleconferencing, remote, that whole discussion. I don't believe there's anything in there at all. So I think that the minutes are incomplete.
Those were after roll call, is that correct? Those were after roll call.
No.
Do you remember, Lisa, when we had that discussion? Where in the agenda we had that discussion?
It
Further
was
in.
noted that Sarah didn't vote. I put it in the,
Yes.
at the beginning of the minutes that Sarah was present, but that she did not vote.
We'll review the.
Right, but that's all that was included.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if there's anything else
Okay.
It
necessary.
was probably missed because it wasn't on the agenda.
Okay.
So-
We'll add that.
Yeah, add that back in.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Good call.
do you want to make the motion then, Warren, and amend it to include that in the minutes?
I move we amend the minutes from the previous meeting to include the information regarding Commissioner Sandberg's remotely teleconferencing with the commission.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Navy and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Chairperson Hoagland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Sandberg, Commissioner Maybe.
Yes.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have no proclamations, no scheduled public comments, no public hearings, no ordinances, but we do have 7 resolutions. And as well as we have, in addition to the agenda, in an action item on procedure for remote participation. So our first resolution tonight is resolution number 4816, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, amending the budget for fiscal year 2017, 2018 by making appropriation adjustments in the amount of $1,105,837 and revenue adjustments in the amount of $1,417,780. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the second reading of this item. There are no changes from the last time we went over it. If there's any questions, the best chart to look at is on page 27. If there's anything I can answer on that one, I'd be happy to.
Any questions from the commission? Or public comment? I guess I usually open with public comments, right? Any public comment on resolution number 4816? Commissioners, any questions?
Did this one include the bad debt service?
Can you come up and state your name and address, please?
Don Platt, 229 South Yellowstone. Did this one include the bad debt service? So how did the city try to mitigate that, and how can you even plan? I mean, it was a pretty significant number, which I assume falls on the taxpayers?
So there's a couple ways to mitigate it. One of the things we do is we do use a billing company. They're getting us a pretty good return right now, above industry standard, which is nice. But still, there's always going to be that bad debt. We do, after a certain amount of time, I forget, I think it's 90 days, turn it over, the billing company turns it over to a collection agency, so it does go to collections at that point. Really, at that point, it's out of our hands. There's nothing else we can do. We try not to limit ambulance service to those who have, insurance coverage. So that's just kind of what we have to accept as part of that.
So if it is bad debt, it goes out to a collections agency. I'm trying to just understand the budget process. So if it's money that is owed back to the city, so would the city still be on the hook for an hour of transport service we have to pay ourselves?
Right, we have to pay the staffing and then the maintenance costs associated with the ambulance.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. So any last calls on comments by commissioners? Do we have a motion for resolution number 4816?
I make a motion, we pass resolution number 4816.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Maybe. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Four.
Commissioner Freeman,
Four.
Commissioner Reed.
Or
Motion passes. Next, we have resolution number 4817, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, fixing the tax levy for fiscal year 2018-2019. Mr. Cardus.
thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is the second reading of this resolution. No changes from last week. And overall, the changes were minimal, in total.
Thank you. Any public comment on resolution number 4817? Any commissioners? Questions, comments? Do I have a motion on resolution number 4817?
I make a motion, we pass resolution number 4817.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Friedman and a second by Schwartz. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Four.
Commissioner Freeman,
Four.
Commissioner Reed.
Or
Motion passes. Next, we have resolution number 4818, a resolution relating to $4,840,000 sewer improvement revenue bond, DNRC Water Pollution Control State Revolving Fund Program, Series 2018D, authorizing the issuance and fixing the terms and the conditions thereof. Mr. Cardus.
thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just the next in the series of loans for the wastewater treatment plant. So this is the SRFD series for this particular loan. This one is at 2% interest is the SRF revolving loan fund. And we will need it now to start paying the contractor. So this is just the next step in continuing along with that process.
Thank you. Any public comments on resolution number 4818? Any commissioner questions or comments? I have one. Where are we as far as completing and finalizing the approval of the loans and moving them forward for completion?
So
The totals?
like how much have we taken so far in
Yes.
total? I'm not talking, I can do how many we
About
take.
13 million.
So
13.
So when will that be finalized?
when will all,
The last,
the last one, it won't be until we make the last payment, well, until we start making the last payment. So what's the, how many more series do we have after this one?
This is the last one.
Is this the last
the
one?
final one. Mhm.
That's it? That's it?
That's it.
all right.
Okay.
Do I have a motion from the commission?
I make a motion to approve resolution 4818.
Second.
A motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Vogler?
Yes?
Commissioner Schwartz?
Four.
Commissioner Friedman?
Four.
Commissioner Amy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Next, we have resolution number 4819, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign all documents required to execute the city manager's recommendation for change order number G3 to the Water Reclamation Facility Professional Services Agreement with AE2S. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we're approaching the ending stages of this project, we're still doing fairly well in our reserve. So these are additive items that the city has asked for. Out of 112,000, 108,000 are things that we are requesting. A couple of them I'll go through here in just a moment, are things that are either failing or don't meet the current standards that we require. So we're going to upgrade them inside of this contract instead of doing it separately in total. So we can include it in these loans for a low interest amount. The items that are included in this change order, the largest item is the expansion of the UV building. If you guys have been out there, that's the one where the UV lights, it goes through the U. Right now, we have a cement pad out in front of that. This change order would actually enclose that and put a sink in it. What that allows us to do is when we bring those UV lights out, we can bring them to that front area still enclosed and clean them there instead of having to carry them across the yard. We're hoping that'll save us some costs and damages as we transport them. So we're really cutting down how far we'll have to transport them. So that's to finish engineering that building and add the addition over that cement slab for both, for basically for maintenance issues for the guys as they work on the UV lights. The second one is to replace the ECS control computer. These will be the controls that run the composting facilities. So if you got out there, those boxes, they're the ones that control the moisture and heat to let the composting go. Our current one happens to be failing, so this gives us an opportunity to replace it within the cost of this project versus having to foot the bill entirely ourselves. So some of this money will come from the USDA grant. Additionally, the next one is the extension of the fiber optic network out to the Public Works building and to the wastewater treatment plant. This wasn't included in the original contract because we didn't know where we'd be at this point. But now that we're this far along, we're comfortable that we can put this back into this contract, extend the fiber optics out to where they need to be for the automated control systems that should be networked into the Public Works building. So that's a nice addition there. This next one is the actual only one that's an engineering change. It's a change to some of the conduit that has to go out to the UV electrical building. They had the wrong conduit in the first design. This isn't an additional cost to the city. It's an increase, but had they designed it correctly the first time, this is the same as it would have cost us if it was designed correctly. So they caught it before they put in the wrong amount or had to take it out. So this is just the cost for the increased material that goes forward there. And then the last one is actually an upgrade to a composting screen. It counts for, we were already upgrading it. We're upgrading it one more time. This should allow us to, within the composting after it's screened, use it in a lot of places around town, whether we can use it for the park, some of the bedding. If we could figure out the economics behind it, it may even allow us to sell some of it to the public if they wish for that kind of compost. So that's going to give us a little more capability as well as reduce the manpower that's needed to run that process. So that's a $16,000 change. So in total, that's $112,000. If you look back on page 78, it'll show that we've used approximately $500,000 of our contingency, and we have $485,000 left. So we've used about exactly 50% of the contingency.
And we have 3 months left.
Well, When's the actual end date on the contract? It's actually next spring.
It's a while out because we have to do the whole startup and get bugs growing there.
Right, but the main portions where we expected change orders that would cost a lot, i.e. the pouring of the cement, the trenching, any of that, we've already gotten through that part. So really the only part left right now is the electrical, the controls. It's gonna be more of a, most of the time is gonna be spent doing the switch over from the current system to the other. So there's still a lot of time left, but there's not a lot of risk left as far as the construction project goes.
I will open it to public first. I do have some questions, but I'll wait. Any public comments?
Jay Keeper, 345 South Main, you said it's a doable interest load. What is the doable interest load?
It's a 2% interest.
2%.
Thank you. Any other public comments? On resolution number 4819? Any commissioner questions, comments? Or anyone? Quentin?
Yeah, regarding the upgrade on the composting,
Screen.
on the screen, is that gonna make a finer compost than we have now? Which is a little denser.
Yeah, it's gonna take all those wood chips and that sort of thing out, so you can actually it'll be
Get
pretty
it
much what
finer.
you get from the store for
That's
compost.
something that, okay,
A lot easier to use.
thank you. All I had. Yeah.
So I have a question. So looking at the document on page 83.
Mhm.
So I asked if the amount of time added or where we're at in the process as far as time. And it says 21 days added to time for substantial completion. Are those days then added into the fact that we are doing improvements that were above and beyond the scope of the design before? What is that?
That is why they included extra days, because they're like extending for this particular one, it's mostly for extending that building addition on it. So that'll be additional work days that are needed to complete it. So you can see that the new extended final readiness for final payment is March 8th.
So we just moved it forward 21 days. So we were at February, beginning of February, and now we're March.
Right.
Okay. So the UV building, $70,000, $70,900, so 71,000. Had we not designed a clean off building, covered building for that?
It wasn't in the original design, and part of that was, these are kind of the additives now that we're getting closer, and we haven't used as much of our contingency as we thought we would have, so we can add some of the things that we wanted, but didn't include in the original pricing, just to make sure that we had enough money to get through. So these are things that we would like, but didn't initially budget for, because we weren't sure how construction would go into this.
So, like, the dream list. Like, in a
I don't know
sense,
if it's
like,
the dream list, but it is the things that we wanted, but we could have done without.
okay, all right. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Do I have a motion on resolution number, 4819?
Yeah, I make a motion we pass resolution 4819.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Navy. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoagland,
Yes?
Commissioner Short,
4?
Commissioner Freeman,
4.
Commissioner Lee.
Motion passes.
I'm gonna have to crawl under there.
Thank you. I lost.
We're on camera.
Our next resolution tonight is resolution number 4820, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, authorizing the city manager to sign an agreement with Livingston School District numbers 1 and 4 for for school resource officer for school years 2018 to 2019, 2019 through 2020, and 2020 to 2021. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is basically just a re-up of the last agreement we had. There are very few, in fact, I'm not sure there's any changes to this one. It's just a change of the dates. So this continues our SRO agreement with the school district, where they're paying for half of the time of the SRO when he's working on the SRO position, so during the school year. The policy is just basically a redo of the effective policy from March of 2012. We did have a meeting with the school earlier in the year. We ironed out a lot of the details. There was some questions about whether we needed to change the policy. I think it ended up being more that we just needed to implement the policy correctly. And so once we went through it with them, I think everyone's happy with the changes we've made. We've sat down and Chief Johnson does most of that work for us. So we are ready to go on that one. And we did send it to the school as well, so they have a copy of it that they're reviewing.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on resolution number 4820? I do have to state I work for the school district, and I work pretty closely with the school resource officer. So I know when we originally met, I was at a kind of a place of interest because I was a commissioner and an employee that works with our officer, Williams, it is, and I chose not to participate in those meetings because I feel like I'm in two different places on this issue. Not in bad places, but two sides.
Full disclosure.
Yes. So commissioners, any questions on the agreement? I'm going to recuse myself on this since I did before. Okay. So do we have a motion from the commission?
I make a motion to approve resolution 4820.
Second.
We have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Freeman,
4.
Commissioner Mayhew,
For,
Motion passes. Next on the agenda, we have resolution number 4815, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, of its intent to discontinue and vacate a portion of the undeveloped North B Street between Montana Street and the Livingston Ditch, between blocks 23 and 24, all located at the original town site of the City of Livingston, Montana, and calling for a public hearing. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've looked at this a couple of times prior. We tabled it from the last meeting to let the Parks and Trails Committee look at it. They sent me an email. They did have some questions on some procedural stuff, but for this particular vacation, they said they did not oppose it. It looked like there were some other areas where they could connect for trails. They didn't think they needed this portion of it. Outside of that, can we bring the map up? Just so people can take a peek at it. Yeah, right there. So the vacated part we're talking about, yep, is right there where the white arrow is. That is the portion down to the top of the next property there that we were looking at. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission first, I guess, and then any comment from the public?
That's first.
So yes. Go ahead.
Okay, where the white arrow is, basically, that's the width of the street and right of way down to the property line that they're seeking to have us abandoned.
Yep, so it'd be vacating the right of way for D Street, basically, so that'd be the extension of D Street south. So it's that is the right of way with D Street.
Right, but the arrow exactly where it is.
A little bit to the left. There, right there.
Okay, but right there, that corridor.
Yep, that corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comment? Questions? Commissioners, any concerns or thoughts on it? I feel like we've been looking at this for a while, so I think we should discuss.
Yeah, if I can make another comment. Generally, you know, we've had a similar one like this brought before us, that I voted against, because the Parks and Trails was involved with that, and it was a viable place. And also the number of residents that voiced their opposition regarding their view shed and whatnot. And in this case, we haven't heard any opposition from any of the adjacent landowners and stuff like that. And I take that into the one thing that I take into consideration more than anything else regarding this. So, and I have walked the property. You can see that there's not a lot of buildable room there anyway. So I'm inclined to be for abandonment.
Quentin, any other comments from the commission? I will go next, I guess, and I'm very leery of abandonments, and I've said it previously multiple times. Would you show us something first before I speak on it? What was abandoned earlier, previously? Which,
In this area or?
yes, the one right at the bottom.
Right, so right there where that arrow is, that rest of D Street should have gone all the way through to Gallatin. And we've abandoned that entire right of way there. You see how it's split between those two properties?
Right.
That's exactly how it'll look going up, is it'll be split between the two properties, the one on the left and the two on the right. Right down the center will be the new property line. So at the bottom where that property line is in the center,
It just extends on.
if that gap had extended down to Gallatin, that's what was vacated earlier.
And how many feet will the abandonment be?
Off the top of my head, it's.
Length and width,
Just the width.
The width is what,
66.
56?
66 feet.
66.
66 feet wide. So each side of the property will get 33.
And the same property owner owns both of those?
On the top, right? I think on the bottom, it's in the packet.
There are two on the east and one on the right.
So would you explain at the bottom of the blue, right there in the rectangle, that now it's yellow again?
No.
That one. Explain that space just below it between the private property. Is that also
Is that the alleyway or is that
That is an alley.
Yeah, that's the gate for the alley.
it's not a used alley?
It is not in use, but it does still exist.
So,
And it will still exist after this as well.
so all of that is still public property from
It's
way in the corner? over-
private property with a city easement. Which is technical, but it actually belongs to landowners, just the city has an easement for an alley in that location.
So that little square at the bottom, the blue one, and then the yellow, no, they're not squares, rectangles. Are those 4 different properties by looking at that line? And are they, could you refresh us on the public, or the ownership of those?
On the, talking the bottom or on the?
So the blue and then the rectangle next to it, and then the top, and then, so they're asking for abandonment of,
On the left
I'm sorry, I went too far over. Here, so are all 3 of these properties, sorry, not 4, owned by the same people?
No. So the larger property on the left is the Hoovers. The larger property on the right is owned jointly between Millers and Hoovers. and then on the bottom is, okay. And they're all in the letter, so. They've all.
Yeah, Misty-Lo's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's on page 116. You can see that.
As I've said before, I'm very leery of abandonments because I don't think that we have a very solid plan with some of our trails. But in this case, we reviewed it, and I was at the Parks and Trails meeting where they did talk about it and have no opposition to this abandonment because the logical areas for possible trails or access are on C and E, right? So they did recommend that they don't have any problems with it. They did have problems with the process, but we will deal with part of that by putting abandonment of public properties into the agenda and the minute or in the notices in a different way, so people know ahead of time. Correct? Did I state that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And that will help the public know. So as far as anything else, does anyone have any ideas or thoughts? Okay. All right. So do I have a motion from the commission on resolution number 4021? No, 4815. It's been so long that the numbers moved quite a bit. Do we have a motion?
I move we accept 4815.
I will second.
We have a motion by Maybe and a second by Short. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Coffey?
Yes.
Commissioner Short?
4.
Commissioner Freeman?
4.
Commissioner Maybe?
Yes.
Motion passes. Our last resolution tonight is resolution number 4821, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Livingston, Montana, accepting the water and sewer extensions for the transfer station solid waste department. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a requirement for our code that we accept all water and sewer extensions. This particular sewer and water extension is to ourselves, which we did ourselves. So this is our extension to us. So I would recommend we accept it.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on resolution number 4821? Do we have any commissioner questions or comments? Mr. Schwartz?
It has been done?
Yes.
And they have a bathroom now out there?
I don't think they have a bathroom yet, not all the way out there, but this is the extension of the water and the sewer as we started.
Okay,
Sorry.
to be able to.
Yes.
That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have a motion from the commission on resolution number 4821?
Yeah, I make a motion that we pass resolution 4821.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Friedman and a second by Navy. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Coffey?
Yes.
Commissioner Short?
4.
Commissioner Freeman?
4.
Commissioner Maybe?
4.
Motion passes. Tonight, we have one action item, the procedure for remote participation. Mr. Cardus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. After the last meeting, I was asked to go and research the remote participation policy across the state. What I found is across the state, there are no procedures. I talked to all the other city managers. Some of them allow it, some of them don't. The ones I talked to that allowed it don't have a written procedure. The state code does not specifically address remote procedure at all. It does talk about electronic meetings, but it doesn't say they're allowed, but it also doesn't say that they are prohibited. So I expanded my search a little bit. I did find some applicable cases with the help of the attorney in Illinois, where the state was sued by a resident because a State Department was holding teleconference meetings. And they said that wasn't allowable by the Illinois state law. Illinois state law is very similar to the Montana state law. That was actually resolved in favor of the state. They said that if it was properly noticed and if there was a means for public participation, that telephonic participation was allowable. I also found a white paper from the University of North Carolina School of Government that probably was the best resource on this that I could find. They talked a lot about it, different methods, different things that had to be addressed, but invariably the one thing that everyone really agreed upon was that if you're going to do it, you should have a policy. The main thing being that, and I'm going to read this from the UNC white paper because I think it was applicable to what we discussed last time. So it says board discretion to allow electronic participation. It says that assuming that remote participation in a board meeting is legal or does not pose a risk of legal challenge, does a local government board member have a right to participate remotely? And their answer is no. There's no legal basis for asserting such right. As noted above, the governing board has authority to establish the rules for its meetings. So what they basically say is it's up to the board. Now this is North Carolina, it's based on North Carolina law. So I looked up the law as opposed to Montana. And in the Montana code, under the municipal, local government, conduct of municipal government, in paragraph 7.5, 4103, under council rules and disciplines, it says the council may determine the rules of its proceedings. So basically it leaves it up to the commission to decide on whether or not it's acceptable or not acceptable. As you go down the list of things that you could meet by, there are obviously, every time you take a step down, you degrade the transparency of the process. Best is if everyone is sitting here around the table, everybody can see, everybody can hear, any public that's participating can observe the commissioner as well throughout the deliberations. Next best would be some kind of video teleconference where you can still see and hear the commissioner, even though they are remote. Next best would be telephonically where you can still hear. The main legal line that they seem to draw in most of these cases is everyone has to be able to hear and everyone has to be able to be heard. So if you go beyond telephone, then you probably don't meet that threshold anymore. So that's going to prohibit you from doing things like holding a meeting by email or Facebook Messenger or text or any medium that doesn't allow you to be heard and doesn't allow you to hear everyone else. So that's kind of where they drew the line as far as what types of electronic media you can use to participate remotely. The other thing they said as far as when you write a policy like this is you have to look at some basic functions. Are you going to allow it, yes or no? If you do allow it, in what instances are you going to allow it? How many commissioners can participate remotely at one time? Can we just stick the phone receiver out in the middle of the desk and everybody can call in from home? Or is there an expectation of the commission to come meet physically in presence? Whether or not people participating remotely can count towards a quorum, or whether or not they can vote, and what you do if during the meeting there's a problem with connectivity. So those are the main, problems you have to solve. Another one being, depending on how paranoid you are, if someone's on the phone, how do you prove it's them? So that's a question that has been addressed. Actually, the best actual policy I found was the Detroit Business Association. Yeah, it was a. That matters too much, but it was the City of Detroit Building Authority had actually a really good remote participation policy. So, taking the information I found from the other city managers, our state code, the white paper from University of North Carolina, and the actual policy from the Detroit Building Authority, I gave you a draft of what I thought a good policy for the city of Livingston remote participation would be. It covers all those things we talked about. It covers some of what I think is your intent as far as trying to maintain as much transparency as possible. You'll notice in here I did not list the number of commissioners who could participate remotely, and that is because in this particular policy, if you are participating remotely, you can vote, but you don't count towards the quorum. And what that does is it does two things for us. One, it automatically ensures that 3 people have to be physically present here for a meeting to happen. So it limits it, no more than 2 can participate remotely. And also, if there are people participating remotely, if they drop off during the meeting because of connections or if they have to leave, there is still a forum here physically to continue to conduct business, and we wouldn't have to cancel a meeting if we were disconnected to the remote participants. I did put in an expectation to appear, so it is stated specifically that if you are here and you are able, you're expected to appear personally, not remotely. It lists 5 reasons that you can participate remotely, being personal illness, personal disability, emergency, military service, or geographic distance. The geographic distance is probably the one that is most open to interpretation. That could be you're out of town on a business trip, or maybe you're at a Montana League in Cities and Towns conference or some other reason. But it does give the commission chair the authority to determine if it's a valid reason or not. So it's still, all the authority for this rests within the commission or the chair of the commission acting as the head of the commission. It does require a 48-hour prior notice to the chair. If the chair determines that that's acceptable, then the chair will notify the city manager, and the city manager will make the technical specifications to get it set up. It also requires the chair to announce at the beginning of the meeting who's going to be attending remotely. And if we have a remote participant, then all votes must be taken by roll call. We pretty much take all votes by roll call anyway, so that's not really much of a change. And then there is a procedure for lost connectivity. This is actually pretty apropos because we would have violated this in our last meeting where Commissioner Sandberg was participating remotely, which she dropped off. Technically, if we had been allowing her to vote at that point, we would have broken the rule that commissioners need to hear all deliberations before they vote on an item. So if they're disconnected, the procedure now states that we have to stop all discussion and give a 5-minute period to try and reconnect them. If they can't be reconnected, then we move on without them at that point, and they can't vote for that item because they won't have heard all the deliberations. If, however, later in the meeting they reconnect and on a different issue can hear all the deliberations, then they would be able to vote on that issue. There's also a policy where if they disconnect 3 times within a meeting, we declare the connection unreliable and they're disconnected at that point. Or if at any time the chair believes that the connection is not good enough, if they're having trouble hearing or we're having trouble hearing them, either one of those is that red line that I said they talked about where everyone has to be able to be heard and everyone has to be able to hear. Again, we'll declare the connection unreliable and then we move on without that person, as long as we have the physical quorum here, which is required. Also, it will be required in the meeting minutes that any remote attendees will be annotated in the minutes, as well as there is a affidavit that comes with this. So if you are participating remotely and we don't know if you're on the phone, when you come back, will sign an affidavit that says, yes, that was me on the phone, and yes, those minutes reflect what I did remotely. And then that will be attached to the minutes, and we'll have a record on file that the commissioner agrees that participated remotely, those are the correct minutes. And then the last restriction on remote participation is it would not be allowed for anytime the commission is acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, because there's a higher standard, and when you're hearing a case put to you, for them to be able to see you or hear you. And it also wouldn't be allowed during closed sessions, because most closed sessions are for privacy reasons, and having someone connected remotely during a private session is probably not a good idea. And those were standard. As far as the policies I did find, those are pretty standard for the times you couldn't participate. So that is my draft submission to you based on those facts that I gave you. So I would be happy to answer any questions on that.
Do we have any public comment first or questions?
Jay Kiefer, 325 South Main. Nowhere in the city manager's advice to the commission did he mention like the possibility of Skype, where you could actually see a person or 2 commissioners that were absent. The residents in the audience could see them and they could hear them. So I don't know what the problem is as far as working with technology. I realized that the last city commission, the city attorney said it's in violation of the state constitution. Well, somehow between the last meeting and this meeting, there seems to be a difference of opinion.
Actually, video teleconference was one way we said was allowable at all times.
Okay. Well, then, is it set up, are we set up currently for Skype on there where a person could talk to you via Skype?
We don't currently have that capability.
Is there a reason why not, that we don't have that capability?
We've never been asked to have that capability.
Consider that a small request.
Any other comments or questions from the public?
There was discussion, do I have to say my name?
Yeah.
I'm Flag 229 South Yellowstone. There's a lot of discussion about being heard. So does that include the, I don't know if the meetings are broadcast live or it's always an after replay, but sometimes you cannot hear. So I'm curious where that being able to be heard applies. Does it apply for someone that wants to see it remotely?
So there's two different standards, I think, depending on what you're talking about. If you're participating remotely as a commissioner, then absolutely you need to be able to be heard and to hear all the official talking. If, we try on the streaming to be able, for people to be able to hear as well as possible. There isn't, because they are not part of the deliberative body, there isn't a legal requirement for them to be heard or for them to be able to hear. We try to provide that service. Most of the time it's reminding people to get closer to the microphone when they're speaking. So there isn't a requirement, but we do make every attempt to make sure that if you're watching remotely, you can hear.
So the being heard is really within this room, and if a commissioner, whoever is remotely, that's the real qualification of being heard.
Yes. Or for the public, like if you're speaking now, then if they were participating remotely, they would have to be able to hear you.
Okay, thank you. So Jay brought up a good point. There seems to be a big disparity on what was said the last meeting on how something was being interpreted and what we're hearing now. So can you explain why the big disparity?
Sure. We got the request last meeting at noon on the day of, so there wasn't a lot of time to do a bunch of research. So it was just an initial brush, hey, let's look at it. You fall to your most conservative interpretation at that point. And the safest interpretation is you don't vote, because then there's no legal jeopardy in that. There's no legal risk. After further research, after digging through it, and it's still not super clear, and honestly, someone could still legally challenge it because there has been no case in Montana where anyone's legally challenged a remote participation by phone. But with a policy that clearly outlines it, that provides all the requirements, I think we're in a much better legal risk category than we would to have allowed thumping with no procedures.
Okay, just so I make sure I understood that. So the reason it was stated the way it was last time was we just really were not sure, so we're going to err on the side of caution.
Yes.
That's not quite how I understood.
Well, that's for me.
So
Or
it's
Jimmy,
very,
can you speak into that?
it's very clear in the Montana Constitution that as a citizen, you have the right to view deliberations of your government. I think with this policy, there are some fail-safes that it's like Mike said, we could still get challenged on it without a doubt. We'd have to fight it. But, looking at it further, I would prefer if this said that it had to be Skype, like Jay mentioned earlier. But I think there's enough safeguards within the policy as is with the affidavit at the end. We can do it, but I think it would be legally safer still to allow like Skype with, to allow the citizens to view like it states in the Constitution.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments or questions first? One.
I know at the end, it's stated, remote will not be allowed for meetings where the commission acts in a quasi judicial capacity or during closed sessions. At the beginning, it seemed more arbitrary. The policy, or this policy, cannot address every possible situation where remote participation may be desired, and as such, the commission has the authority to suspend the rules of the remote participation policy by a 2/3 majority vote of those members present. what would trigger that, other than the two qualifications at the end? I get the impression that there's some other triggers for not allowing it.
So that is a catch-all for, that's a basic Robert's Rules of Orders, suspend the rules. That can be applied to anything, or the commission can actually suspend its own rules if they feel it's appropriate. So there may be a certain topic where normally remote participation would be allowed, but the commission feels strongly that if you're going to participate in that topic, you need to be here and you need to be seen by the community. So you can suspend your own rules and say, no, we're not going to allow remote participation in this case because we feel strongly everyone should be here for this item. So that would be you saying, we know what our rules are. We're going to suspend them because we feel strongly about this item. And you could do it the other way around. If we're having a closed session, it's not illegal to allow someone to participate remotely by closed session. So you may say, okay, we understand the risks of a closed session, that we're doing this for privacy and now we're allowing someone to participate remotely. But we think it is paramount that the commissioner who's not here due to illness or injury needs to participate in this meeting. So we are going to suspend our own rules and we are going to allow you to participate during a closed session. So that's just it's kind of a boilerplate way for the commission to have the ultimate say in what they do.
Mhm.
So if you feel any of these rules don't apply, if for some reason you said we're going to suspend our rules and the remote participant today is going to count towards the quorum. But it takes a 2/3 majority to do that. So it's a pretty high standard, but it does give you the flexibility. You're not handcuffing yourself with your own rules. You can say, listen, in this case, our rules don't make sense. We think they make sense most of the time, but this is an exception. We're going to make an exception as the commission to that rule.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Juan? Guys?
No, I've been reading over this and well, it's not my specialty, but it looks like it covers just about, all the questions that we did have. And it does make it pretty clear and concise. I see no place to amend this particular document at this time.
Thank you. A couple of things that come to mind on it. I know one of the things that made me uncomfortable is us having to make a decision so late in the process or in the request. This will help deal with that. Jay gave us his advice. We didn't have a lot of time to look through and figure out if it was what we should do or not. And I hope that doesn't happen anymore because it was too short notice for comfort, in my opinion. But I also think because of that, I think, this was an amendment to the agenda, and I think we should have some time to look at it and do a little more researching if you need, and that would include all the commissioners having time for that. So would you guys be okay with just holding on it and putting it on the next agenda for the vote at that time?
Yes, I'd like all commissioners present to vote on this.
That's fine.
And I'd like to see it put on the next meeting's next agenda. And how do we do that?
So make
Just
a
table it for
motion
now.
to table and put it on the next agenda for.
So to get it on the agenda, we have
Just
to
say table it to the next.
table it till next meeting.
Do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I make a motion, we table adopting the remote participation policy until next city commission meeting.
Second.
So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please, or let me restate it, to table the agenda item. I can't talk right now. So we have a motion by Schwartz and a second by Friedman. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Hopland,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwartz,
4.
Commissioner Friedman,
4.
Commissioner Maybe,
Yes.
Motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have our city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have a couple tonight. We are looking at also scheduling the legislative session for next time, so I'll try and get some information out early. But if there are legislative issues that you are interested in or would like to see discussed, please send those to me, and I will get those on the next one. Also, you'll get this in hard copy later, but I just wanted to give you some quick updates on, if I can find it back. I got the August stats from our code enforcement officer. So for the month of August, the 1st through the 31st, we did 29 code enforcement actions, 5 animal complaints, 27 parking complaints, 13 abandoned vehicles, 151 total calls for our code enforcement officer. Parking tickets, he personally levied was 89 for a total of $1,718 if all the fines are paid. He ticketed 16 vehicles with a warning for removal. Of those, 13 vehicles complied and moved and met the ordinance. He also ticketed, warned 3 trailers for removal, and all 3 of those trailers complied and moved their vehicles to combine with the, or to be in line with the code. Also, I'll send you a copy of this. In our impound lot, he arrowed the items that he has impounded. It includes a camper trailer, I think that's an animal trailer, a truck and trailer, a semi-trailer, and another camper trailer. So he's been pretty busy. So you will see those items if you pay close attention to the claims. You'll see a lot of Whistler towing claims in there for those. But those will all be either held, or if they aren't picked up, then those will be sold in one of the surplus auctions. So he's been pretty busy August. I will get you a hard copy of those stats.
Thank you. Anything else? City commission comments. Warren.
Basically, boy, this is really beating a dead horse. The railroad crossing. I've seen a couple letters. I had a couple thoughts about that. I'll kind of preface it by saying I think at this particular point in time or in our history is kind of a real anomaly. The financial situations of the country, i.e. the stock market, is like at a record high. Everything is, for the most part, I'm not a Pollyanna, but for the most part, everything is at the top. I don't think we can base a decision, a long-term decision, on what's happening now. I saw a population prediction for Livingston, and it was a flat line out to, I don't know, 2040 or 2050, something like that. And I think that there's a couple goals that are trying to be reached as far as the railroad crossing. The main two being traffic. There was a letter in the paper today regarding that, and we've heard the same before. It's current traffic and emergency response to the north side, and that's, I don't think too many people would disagree with that. And boy, I'm probably going to get shot for saying this, but I don't know if the disadvantages of a closer in crossing, and the only one I've ever heard of is a star crossing. I don't even know if there's a star, if there's any other option even available. But that would accomplish those first two objectives. Plus, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think all of the studies and permits or whatever have been done on them, on that crossing, in terms of environmental studies and other studies. So it would be a much more immediate or way shorter reaction time to go that route and accomplish what really seems to be the two main goals without getting burdened by long timeline, additional things, and maybe putting something where it shouldn't be, meaning the crossing. And if things are going to change that much, we might need both of them anyway down the road. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Mel?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Quentin?
I still keep getting back to the same old thing downtown. Business owners or employees parking downtown and being in the same spot for to 6 hours. I know we can't police it 24 hours a day, but I heard scuttlebutt that somebody, business owner was putting out letters, putting on cars, reflecting that. I'm just wondering if there's anything that we could do city-wise to educate, building owners and business owners regarding parking somewhere else and into retail space. So I know it's an ongoing thing we have to keep looking at, but from the statistics that Mike has shown, we're moving forward on this. The ordinances that we have, trying to enforce them. Yeah, I want to get moving on this underpass thing as well. I do know quite a bit about, which I could bring Warren in on the pitfalls of Star Road underpass there, but I think that's a discussion we need to have broader, with more community involvement, and set a timeline to move forward on this. Just have a public comment period and stuff like that. Move this forward. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have a couple requests of the commission. I would like to put on our agenda the discussion of our priorities, because we've talked about big issues that need to be discussed and moved on, and, with public included in that process. And so I will state them again. We stated them previously at the last meeting as a commission. We have downtown planning. So people want to be part of the active transportation and the parking issue and future planning for the downtown to make it more viable for pedestrians as well as the driving public. Then we have the growth policy coming up that we need to include the public on. We have ordinance review, which is a huge undertaking, which is most likely our city manager with various entities helping in that. We have need for an update on our impact fees and what we'll do to move forward on analyzing. And I know that we have a possible study that has to be done, required by the state, is that correct? And then, so from that, I would like to require that, or request versus required, that all the commissioners have a priority list as to how or what you think we should cover, when we should do it, what's the most important things to the community through obviously the commissioners' voices. And I would love some ideas on how we move forward on some of these. Well,
Yeah, we were talking about the growth policy, and this goes to our city manager. I brought this up last time, but at one of the state meetings, I heard Dan Clark from MSU. Is this still a viable thing, which is not a high cost for us? I don't think he even charges, but I thought he did a very good job in handling that whole process. And we went through the whole process in a meeting, and it was very good participation. So I wonder if that option is still available.
It's probably available. They're pretty tightly booked, and they usually do more of the strategic planning.
Along with
More than the growth policy. The growth policy is probably more technical than what the MSU guys usually do, but I'll talk to Dan and see what he recommends. But they definitely, with the strategic plan and that kind of thing, I think they've set that forward. But I'll check and see if they do growth policy, but I'm not sure they actually do the technical.
Okay, I think it might be worth, might be worth a question.
Could we go through them to discuss a strategic plan for our community and the city's role in it?
We could, but I would talk to the Park County Community Foundation first. They are in the process of doing a visioning initiative where they have hired a consultant to compile a lot of the data that's already out there. So try and find, to mine things like the Prospera study, the Northern Rockies Economic Development Study, and Headwaters, and try and mine the information that's applicable to Park County and Livingston, and then turn that into kind of a community visioning process where they're looking to do community engagement across the entire county and come up with a vision for what the entire county should look like. So I think they're kind of taking that on as Park County Community Foundation, which would be great. I think that's a great place to put that, a nonprofit who's more county focused than just the city. And I think they can bring in a lot more people. So I've been attending those meetings for the last month or so, kind of helping them shape the process and what that would look like and what we would need from the city's point of view for useful data going forward. So they've already gotten quite a ways in that process, and they're looking to do more this spring.
So we have a work session planned, correct, coming up that we all agreed on to discuss the priorities and how we move forward. So do you have any updates on that or a possible timeline or when that may be?
That really is up to you guys and what your schedules look like. If we're going to go forward with that, I think what I would request is that you each send me maybe your top 7 priorities listed in rank order.
Do you want to do a little poll for us? Or?
I mean, I can send them out to you, but I don't want to determine them ahead of time because there might be something I'm not thinking of. I think it'd be easier if you each came up with your own 7 and then we can combine the lists and see where things fall out. And then we'd end up with probably more than 7, but then you can jog each other's, minds and look at it and say, oh, hey, that's my end thought of. And then we can use that work session to prioritize them. So I give you a list and then try to provide some background info on that. What if we do
You'll email us a request and then we will respond and then we will discuss them at a future meeting.
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks for you to think about the issues you want and get it back to me, and then 2 weeks for me to be able to compile them and give you some background information on the items, kind of where we're at. So we could be looking, let's see, probably don't want to do it the week of the city and towns. Maybe the second week of October. That's a holiday week. Maybe do it on that Thursday, like the 11th of October. Does that sound like a time that might work?
The possible work session to discuss, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
That works for me.
And just to fill you in on the timeline as far as the crossing groups go, because you requested that there be public meetings on those. If I can get it set up, looking for maybe the 29th, which is a Saturday for the first one, and then do them maybe every other Thursday in October. So it'd be like the 4th and the 18th. Depends on how many you want total.
Do you guys have any feedback on that?
That's good.
You said when would the first one be?
for the crossing, the first one would be that Saturday, the 29th, trying to get it in before hunting season opens up. So people could come in on Saturday, and then we'll also have a couple of weeknight options for people to come in on Thursday night to see what they're doing.
And we'll be receiving a suggested list of 7?
No,
For-
I'm gonna let you guys come up with your own list of stuff.
Okay,
That way I'm not influencing.
Pushing the agenda.
Yeah, I'm not influencing that process at all. It's your 7 top items. And then I can tell you what my 7 top are when we have a work session.
So then we'll move on to, after we get the priorities, the downtown planning, some issues potentially, depending on how the commission wants to move forward. Yeah, I just want to make sure the downtown planning issue was pretty strong in that people feel like they wanted to be a part of it. And we don't want to forget that we need to be listening to the public and letting them help us in these decision-making processes. So we have that. We have, like I said, we said the crossing for sure that we are planning meetings towards in the future. Are we missing anything else at this time? And he'd like legislative agenda items if commissioners have any. Anything else?
Nope.
I'm missing?
Good.
Good stuff.
Alright. So I guess we have already, I feel like it came on so quickly.
Take a
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I'll second.
So we have a motion for adjournment from Schwartz and a second by Mayhew. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. This meeting of the Livingston City Commission adjourns at 7:46.
I know, that's a big deal. Already.
That was fast paced. The first thing is to turn the TV off.
Kidding.
Because it's so early, we don't